Put those down by the door, my mother said. I was standing barefoot in the hallway with a bowl of mashed potatoes in both hands, steam fogging my glasses, when I saw 2 black trash bags filled with my clothes. My father didn't even look embarrassed. You have until noon, Elena. I stared at him. I paid rent 3 weeks ago. My brother Caleb leaned against the kitchen doorway, sipping coffee from my grandmother's old mug. Yeah, he said, grinning, and now you get to enjoy figuring life out. Behind him, my cousins sat frozen at the dining table, pretending they hadn't heard. My aunt looked down at her plate. Nobody asked where I was supposed to go on Thanksgiving morning. My mother wiped her hands on a towel and said, Your brother and his girlfriend need the room. You're 27, we're done enabling you. Then my father slid an envelope across the entry table. Inside was a handwritten move-out notice and a demand for $200 in damages for scratching the floor, moving my own desk. I set the mashed potatoes down slowly. I paid for the groceries, I said. I gave you extra for the water heater. I cleaned the guest room. I paid rent. My mother's mouth tightened. Your grandmother spoiled you, she said. We won't. That sentence hit harder than the trash bags. Because 3 years earlier my grandmother Ruth had been lying in a hospital bed, thin as paper, her fingers cold around mine. She had pressed a sealed folder into my hands and whispered, When they make you feel small, take this to the credit union. Not your father, not your mother, you. I had never opened it. Part of me was afraid it would only be sentimental papers. Part of me was afraid my parents would find out and accuse me of acting greedy after Grandma died. Now Caleb lifted his phone. Smile, he said, the family chat needs to see this. My father pointed at the door, out. So I went to my room, pulled the old folder from the back of my closet and put it in my purse. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I walked past the table, past the relatives, past my brother's camera, and out of the house I had been paying to live in for 5 years. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from the branch manager at the credit union. Mr. Patel opened Grandma's folder. His face changed before he reached the second page. He stood, walked to the office door and quietly locked it. Then he turned back to me and lowered his voice. Madam, he said, you should sit down. Mr. Patel didn't hand the folder back. He sat down across from me, placed both palms flat on the desk and asked, How long have you been paying your parents to live at 118 Briar Lane? The address sounded different coming from him, official, heavy. 5 years, I said, since I moved back after Grandma Ruth died. His eyes flicked to the papers again. Did they ever give you a lease? No's. Rental agreement. No's. Receipts. I swallowed. Text messages, bank transfers, sometimes cash. He turned his monitor slightly away, not hiding it exactly but careful, like whatever he was looking at had rules around it. What did they call the payments? He asked. Rent, utilities, house expenses. I opened my banking app with shaking fingers. Sometimes Mom would text me things like, mortgage is due Friday, or don't make us chase you for rent. Mr. Patel's jaw tightened. I scrolled back through years of transfers. $600. $700 when the pipes froze. $400 extra when Dad said the water heater almost ruined them. One labelled Mom Mortgage Help. He looked at that one for a long second. Then he said carefully, Ms. Marlowe, there hasn't been a mortgage attached to that property in years. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped my phone. That's not possible. They said Grandma left debts. They said the house was expensive to keep. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, Did your parents ever prevent you from seeing mail related to the property? A memory flashed so sharply I almost spoke over him. Dad at the mailbox. A cream envelope in his hand. Me asking, is that from the credit union? Him snapping, old estate junk, stop digging through dead people's business. Then Mom at the kitchen sink weeks after the funeral, burning papers in a metal mixing bowl while saying, Grief makes people greedy, Elena. Don't become one of those girls. I pressed my hand to my stomach. Mr. Patel printed a single page from the file. When it came out, he covered the top half with his hand before sliding it toward himself. I can't give legal advice, he said, but you need to call a real estate attorney immediately, today if possible. I looked at the locked office door. Am I in trouble? No, he said, but someone may be. Then his voice lowered. Do Richard and Diane know you came here? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. Then again. Mom, if you involve outsiders, don't come crawling back. Dad, return that folder now. My fingers went cold. I looked up at Mr. Patel. How did they know what folder I had? I didn't go back to the house alone. The business card in Grandma Ruth's folder had softened at the corners, but the name was still clear. Marisol Vance, estate attorney. When I called, I expected a receptionist. Instead, a woman answered on the second ring. This is Marisol. My name is Elena Marlowe, I said. My grandmother was Ruth Marlowe. I think she left me something about 118 Briar Lane. The line went silent. Then Marisol said, Where are you right now? The credit union. Stay there until I arrive. 40 minutes later, she walked in wearing a grey coat, carrying a leather folder, and looking like she had already been waiting years for this call. She read the first few pages from Grandma's folder, asked Mr. Patel 2 questions, then looked at me. We're going to the house, she said, but you are not walking in behind me, you are walking in beside me. By the time we reached Briar Lane, Thanksgiving dinner was in full motion. Cars filled the driveway. Through the front window, I could see Caleb sitting at the head of the dining table, laughing with a plate piled high in front of him. My father was carving turkey. My mother was refilling glasses like nothing had happened. Marisol rang the bell. My mother opened the door. The smile dropped from her face the second she saw me. Elena, she said, I told you not to make a scene. Marisol stepped forward. Mrs. Marlowe, I'm Marisol Vance. I represented Ruth Marlowe. The dining room went quiet. My father appeared behind Mom, knife still in hand from the turkey. This is private family business. Caleb snorted from the table. She brought a lawyer because she got kicked out of Mommy and Daddy's house. Marisol looked past him, then back at my parents. Who told you this was your home? Nobody moved. My father's grip tightened around the carving knife. Excuse me. Marisol's voice stayed calm. Ruth Marlowe left protected instructions involving 118 Briar Lane. Elena was named in documents you were legally required to preserve. Aunt Linda pushed back her chair. Diane, is this why Ruth stopped talking to Richard before she died? My mother's face went red. Oh, don't start, she snapped. Ruth was confused. Elena is using a dead woman to get attention. Dad reached for the folder in my hands. Marisol's voice cut through the room. Touch those documents again, Mr. Marlowe, and we'll discuss evidence preservation in front of everyone. His hand froze in the air. Caleb's girlfriend stood slowly, one hand on her stomach. Caleb, did you know about this? Caleb looked at his plate. That was answer enough. Then Dad turned to the room, his voice loud and ugly. Elena has always been unstable. She steals from us, she lies, and now she's trying to take our house because we finally stopped paying her way. My phone buzzed. A notification from the family group chat flashed across the screen. Caleb had posted the video of me being thrown out that morning. I opened it with my thumb trembling. But under the video, someone had replied. Aunt Linda had posted a photo of an old deed. And my name was on it. Aunt Linda's message sat under Caleb's video like a match dropped onto dry grass. Richard, why is Elena's name on this? For 1 second, the whole dining room seemed to hold its breath. Then my father moved. He lunged toward Aunt Linda's phone so fast her chair scraped backward. Caleb's girlfriend stepped between them, one hand braced on the table. Don't touch her, she said. My mother clapped her hands once, sharp and desperate. Everyone out, dinner is over. But no one stood. My cousin stared at my father. Aunt Linda kept the phone pressed against her chest. Caleb looked smaller than he had 10 minutes earlier, his smugness draining into silence. That was when I saw it. My parents weren't furious because Marisol was lying. They were terrified because other people were watching. Marisol turned to me and spoke softly enough that only I could hear. Ruth suspected they were pressuring you for money. That's why she put copies with the credit union and with me. My throat tightened. The letters Dad took from the mailbox. Likely annual trust notices, she said, possibly more. Dad pointed at us. Get out of my house. Marisol looked at him. We're leaving because this is volatile, not because you have the right to order her out. I spent Thanksgiving night in a motel room with 2 trash bags of clothes beside the bed. Instead of eating dinner, I forwarded Marisol every payment I could find. Rent, house expenses, Dad emergency repair, Mum mortgage help. By midnight, my entire life had become a timeline of transfers. The next morning, Marisol filed the first formal notices. She also sent my parents a preservation letter ordering them not to destroy documents, remove household records, sell anything, or change the locks. At 9:14 a.m., Dad texted me a photo of a new deadbolt. Try your key now. Marisol read it and almost smiled. That was unwise. By noon, a sheriff's deputy stood beside us on the porch at Briar Lane for a civil standby. Dad opened the door with Caleb behind him. Both of them wore the same offended expression, like I was the one who had crossed a line. Marisol handed my father a notice. He looked at the top page. His mouth opened. Nothing came out, because the first line identified me as the legal owner of 118 Briar Lane. Marisol didn't explain everything on the porch. She let the notice do the talking. My father stared at the words so long the sheriff finally said, "Sir, you need to step back and allow them to complete service." Dad's hand tightened around the paper. This is fake. Marisol opened her folder. It is certified. Mom appeared behind him in yesterday's blouse, her hair pinned badly, her face pale. Richard. He didn't answer her. Caleb grabbed the notice from Dad's hand, read the first line, and looked at me like I had somehow tricked the ink onto the page. Owner, he said, what does that mean? It means, Marisol said, Elena Marlowe is the legal owner of 118 Briar Lane. The full truth came out later, that afternoon in Marisol's office. Grandma Ruth had bought the house decades earlier. My parents moved in after a financial disaster, and Grandma let them stay because she believed family should have a place to recover, but they never owned it outright. When Grandma saw how they treated me after I moved back, how they took my money, gave Caleb priority, and made me feel like a guest in my own family, she changed her estate plan. The house went into a trust. I was named the sole beneficiary after her death. Copies of the deed history, trust instructions, and ownership records were held by the credit union and by Marisol. My parents had been notified after Grandma died. They knew. They hid the letters. They told me the house was theirs. They made me pay rent in a home my grandmother had already protected for me. I sat at the conference table, staring at my name on the deed until the letters blurred. Then I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because the people who called me a burden had been living under my roof, eating food I bought, using repairs I paid for, and charging me for permission to sleep in a room that legally belonged to me. Marisol slid a box of tissues closer. I didn't take one. What happens now? I asked. Now, she said, we demand possession and an accounting. My parents refused at first. Dad claimed family rights. Mom called relatives crying that I was throwing my own parents into the street. But Aunt Linda posted 2 things in the family chat, the old deed with my name on it, and Caleb's video of me being kicked out on Thanksgiving morning. The same relatives who had looked away from my trash bags now watched my father snatch at legal documents and heard my brother laugh while I stood barefoot in the hallway. By Sunday night, no one was defending them. Aunt Linda stopped answering Mom's calls. My cousins left the family chat. Caleb's girlfriend moved out after learning the room promised to her came from a lie. Caleb blamed me for one day, then turned on our parents when he realized there was no free house, no inheritance, and no place waiting for him. Marisol handled the legal side carefully. Because they had changed the locks after receiving written notice, and because my payment records showed years of money taken under false pretenses, my parents had very little room to pretend this was a misunderstanding. They couldn't repay 5 years of rent all at once, but Marisol secured a signed repayment agreement from their savings and future income. Then came their final payment. Not cash. Not another transfer. An eviction notice. Weeks later, the sheriff returned to Briar Lane. This time, Dad didn't shout. He carried boxes to the curb with his jaw clenched and his eyes fixed on the driveway. Mom walked past me with her lips pressed so tightly they looked bloodless. Caleb wouldn't look at me at all. The neighbors watched from their porches. For once, I wasn't the one being humiliated. I stood on the front steps holding the keys. When the door closed behind them, the house felt too quiet. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls like I was asking permission from a place that had already been mine. In Grandma Ruth's old room, I opened the curtains. Sunlight spilled across the dusty floor. I kept the dining table, but I replaced every chair. I turned the room Caleb had been promised into my office. I changed the locks legally, updated every record, and placed one framed photo of Grandma near the entryway where everyone would see her first. Months later, I hosted Thanksgiving in that same house. Aunt Linda brought pie, Marisol stopped by with flowers, no one raised their voice, no one asked what I owed, no one made me feel like I had to earn a seat at my own table. When Aunt Linda looked around and said, "Ruth would have loved seeing you here," I looked at the walls my grandmother had protected and answered calmly, "It was never theirs to take." That was the day I stopped paying rent on a life that had belonged to me all along.